Hello, welcome to my stream. I haven't been on for a little while. If you are watching the VOD, my name is Nathan Hatch, and I talk about health issues. If you would like, you can skip ahead to when we actually get to chatting about this stuff. This is a surprise stream I didn't even announce, so it might take a little while for people to stroll in. So you could skip ahead about we'll give it about 10 minutes before I start. Yeah, welcome. If you want to, you can follow me here for notifications of future streams at Nathan Guy Hatch on Twitter and Nate Hatch on Instagram, spelled NAYTEHATCH. My website is also Fuck Portion Control, and there's links in the description beneath this video. So, yeah, welcome. Hope you're all doing well. I will return shortly. Oh, also, you can ask me questions when I get to chatting. So feel free to ask them in the chat if you have questions, and we can casually start answering questions if you like. If you guys have any pressing things until we really get started. How are you guys doing? I haven't really talked yet today. My voice is a little scratchy. Oh, excuse me. Hey, Mike. Yeah, nice to see you. I can always count on you as a participant. Um, this was totally spontaneous. I didn't even post a notification. Um, I've been working a lot on my book update. It's been all consuming. But I was thinking that it's been a while since I streamed, and I was trying to come up with something to talk about. I mean, there's a lot of things to talk about, but nothing that I thought was maybe very poignant for the moment. And I saw long COVID being talked about a bit on social media, so I thought, oh yeah, that's probably a good thing to contribute to. A lot of people don't actually know really anything about it, even a lot of medical professionals. So I thought I could contribute something and get another stream out there. How are you doing? Things going well for you? Did you ever get COVID, Mike? I got it 3 times. It was not fun. Oh, that's good. Lucky. Well, I guess we've waited long enough. Go ahead and start the stream officially. Oh yeah, that is really surprising. I forget which scene I go to next. It's been that long since I streamed last. I think it's this one. Oh yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that is very surprising to not have got it in it. Well, actually, Mike, all that means you definitely got exposed. But you're healthy enough to have not caught the symptoms. Your body fought it off right. But yeah, anyway, welcome. I thought today, I haven't streamed in a while, so I thought today we would talk about long COVID, because it seems to be something that a lot of people are dealing with. Unlike Mike here, who is healthy, I have cystic fibrosis. I didn't even know that I had cystic fibrosis, though, until about 2 years ago, in the middle of the pandemic, actually. And I caught it 3 times. The first time I caught it right when it started, and hardly anybody knew what was even going on. So like, it wasn't even like I could, oh yeah, I can explain that too, Mike. So, I didn't even know, nobody even knew that it was going on really. And, I didn't have a mask or anything because it was right at the beginning. And then the second time I caught it was from a family member who, brought it to our, not home, because we don't live together, but like a gathering, and didn't tell anybody they were sick, and they were coughing in the middle of everyone. And then the third time I got it was toward the end of the pandemic, as like people's guard was kind of dropping, and I was even still using a mask, but I caught it, I think, from a grocery store, because you got to buy food, but because so if you're unfamiliar with my work, I wrote several articles about COVID right when it was happening, about how to not cure, but cure infection. It doesn't prevent infection, but like, for instance, so I have cystic fibrosis, and I caught it 3 times, and each time I got better within 24 hours. That's how well it worked, because like, COVID is a dangerous virus, but our body can deal with that kind of a virus fairly easily if you have the nutritional resources inside your body to actually handle it. And with my long research, like my massive accumulation of research that I've done for my book, Portion Control, and my own other personal health problems, having cancer, like, I already knew a lot about viruses, so it really wasn't that difficult to treat it. And if you want to find those articles, they are on my website. You can just search in the search for COVID coronavirus. But essentially, so cystic fibrosis is a condition. It's considered a genetic disease, but my research is kind of showing that it's actually caused by a parasite. But it's a disease where your body has a really hard time handling some of the electrolytes, like chloride and sodium, in your body, and that causes a thickening of mucus on your mucous membranes, in your lungs and in your gut. It damages your pancreas and your lungs. A lot of people with severe, see, one of the reasons that I was never diagnosed with it earlier in my life was because my condition is not that severe at all. It can be so bad that that people have it when they're very young and have to have one or more lung transplants throughout their life. Like, that's how bad the disease can get. When I started coughing in my early 30s, I didn't think much of it because while it was persistent, it wasn't particularly painful or violent, except when I started getting really, really ill around the time that I was diagnosed with tumors on my thyroid. I was coughing all the time, and just constant coughing. And I would try to sleep at night. I would go lay down, and I would be hit with a coughing fit. And I would just start coughing for like an hour without stopping, and I'd have to go in the living room and watch TV, and I had really bad insomnia, and I tell about all of this in my book. These health problems, and even when I told the hospital that I had a persistent cough that hadn't gone away in like a few years, all they did was X-ray my lungs, and they told me from the X-rays that I was fine, which is really absurd too, because with the prevalence of cystic fibrosis, it's not that rare. And you'd think that 30, an otherwise healthy, I mean, I wasn't healthy at all though, but I didn't even look healthy, but I should have been as a 33-year-old, privileged white male. I shouldn't have those health problems, like with the access to nutrition, and economic opportunities that I had in healthcare. That's just not a common thing. And so you would think that doctors would, maybe suspect something like that, but none of them did. And anyway, so after I started treating my cancer, which is basically the whole story of my book, which encompasses a lot of health issues, my cough got better. Eventually, at one point, it was so sensitive though that I couldn't even take a shower without the chlorine vapor in the hot water from irritating my lungs and causing a coughing fit as well. And that's partly because so like specifically the cough in cystic fibrosis in lung disease is from a persistent chronic infection by a bacterium called Pseudomonas aeruginosa. And your body is not able to clear it, so it's in there all the time, and so then your lungs are constantly producing an inflammatory immune reaction, and the damage that occurs to mucosal tissues in cystic fibrosis comes from the immune system's response to those pathogens. And this actually does have relevance for coronavirus and long COVID, which will make sense the longer as we get further into it, and you'll see. So when you have like chronic infections, when you have any infection, your body mobilizes immune cells, and there's a lot of focus on immune cells when people talk about immunology. But one of the most important things is actually this pathway called the peroxidase system. It's usually called the lactoperoxidase system, but there are more peroxidases, and peroxidases are an enzyme. And there are several of them that are involved in the immune response. Lactoperoxidase is a big one. There's also eosinophil peroxidase, myeloperoxidase, and even the pathway that makes thyroid hormone in the thyroid involves a peroxidase called thyroid peroxidase. So these systems are quite ubiquitous in our body, and they function by oxidizing halides, and halides are chlorine, bromine, iodine, fluorine, or the iodides. The halides versions, which would be chloride, iodide, bromide, fluoride, and I think, is that all of them? And also uses cyanide. Cyanide actually behaves like a halide in our bodies, actually. And dietary cyanide is actually an important nutrient for our body in the immune system. And dietary sources of cyanide are things like the brassica families, like Brussels sprouts and cabbage and broccoli and kale and turnips, and also other foods like almonds. Almonds have cyanide, and so do like kidney beans. A lot of foods, actually, even carrots have a little bit of cyanide in them, actually. So cyanide is actually quite abundant in our environment, or common in our environment, maybe not abundant. And also, actually, I want to quickly state a disclaimer. There are people out there who have misguided ideas about cyanide and use too much of it. And the dysfunction or the inability of cyanide to have an effect on your body, on your health, is not a function of quantity. So you're much more likely to just poison yourself by using concentrated sources of cyanide. It should work with the small amounts that are in normal food. And actually, that's one of the reasons why you should eat your greens, because those nutrients include cyanide, which actually helps to run our immune system, among the other nutrients that they have. So, but yeah. Anyway, so you have in cystic fibrosis, you have this chronic infection with Pseudomonas aeruginosa in your lungs, and that makes you very susceptible to coronavirus infection, which is another reason why I got it 3 times. And it kind of also led to me. I didn't get diagnosed with cystic fibrosis, but it's obviously cystic fibrosis. I mean, there's no other reason to have a cough for the last like 10 years of my life. And because of its effect on electrolyte function, causes like sweat disorders. Like I've always had sweating disorders. Also, actually, strangely, one other very weird. I mean, it's not that weird because it makes a lot of sense, but one very particular symptom of cystic fibrosis in males is like never having wet dreams, because the epididymis and the other parts of the male reproductive system that transport sperm are mucosal pathways. And because the mucus is thickened, their sperm doesn't transport very well to the prostate. So you don't ever have a wet dream, because the part of the reason for a wet dream is that your sperm production gets too much for your prostate to retain. So it's like a spontaneous ejaculation. And I've never had a wet dream because of that. Fun for me. Yeah, my life has been really great. So, but anyway, so this made me very susceptible to coronavirus infection. But because I know how our immune system, my research actually about 1.5 to 2 years before COVID started was focusing on the immune system. So I'd actually had quite a bit of experience understanding how the immune system worked. Oh, well, and yeah, so Mike, like part of the reason that those enzymes are called peroxidases is because they use peroxides as the substrate. So the peroxidase enzymes also function by preventing some peroxidation in the body. They consume hydrogen peroxide and as the oxygen source for oxidizing the halides in the immune reaction. So they actually help to prevent peroxidation to some degree. That also is a major function of both of glutathione peroxidase, which, as far as I know, is not directly involved in the immune reaction, but it indirectly supports it, and also vitamin E. Vitamin E helps to stop oxidation chain reactions from occurring. So, but anyway, so when COVID came around, I already knew quite a bit about the immune system and viral infections. And so I wrote an article about the major strategies that could be used to restrain COVID infection. And these are also actually relevant, though, toward long COVID. The same concept kind of applies, because the consequence behind long COVID is that the immune response during COVID was not sufficient enough to prevent these kinds of damages to the body. So anyway, so first let's talk about how you treated COVID, how I treated COVID. One of the first things to use was aspirin. Aspirin is really good, not for very, very young children, but anybody who's, probably like older than 5 years old. Aspirin can be used to very effectively restrain viral infection. Not chronic. Well, actually, it does have some effect for chronic, but acute viral infections. Aspirin is slightly antibiotic, and it also increases pathways in the body that help the body fight infections. For instance, there's this chemical that our body produces during an infection called interferon. And what interferon does is it signals to other cells that they are infected, and that helps other cells lock down the pathways which are normally exploited by pathogens. Oh, excuse me. There's my corona. I mean, not corona, COVID. My cough actually has been going in and out and getting better, and then sometimes worse. And like, I notice actually when I do experiment with halides, I actually cough more, because my the peroxidase enzymes are actually like making more of the halides, which are the oxidizing agent that causes the damage in the first place. But anyway, that derailed my train of thought. What was I saying? Aspirin. Yeah. Okay. So, so aspirin. Helps, and aspirin is shown by studies to actually increase the production of interferon during infectious events. I think that that's one of its major antiviral functions. But one of the other ones too, that's very important, is that viruses. So when viruses hijack a cell, and this is also very relevant toward all of the fear mongering that was going around with like mRNA viruses. Wait, what is that? mRNA? I can't remember what it's called. Anyway, yeah, mRNA. When viruses hijack your cells, they change your genetics. Like that, they do that. That's how viruses replicate. And so it's really funny to be afraid of vaccines that do that, and the mRNA vaccines, because that's what viruses do. Like that's exactly how viruses like replicate in our cells. They hijack our cellular machinery, insert their own viral code, and then they use our cells to replicate themselves. And it's actually really interesting too, because there is some evidence that viruses are responsible for some features in our evolutionary history. I don't remember exactly which ones, because it's not a big focus on my research, but viruses are like, very consequential and influential in our evolutionary history and in our general health. And so, but anyway, so viruses hijack our cells, but in some of the ways in which they alter the cell, for instance, our cells normally run, when they are healthy, run on what's called oxidative phosphorylation, which is cellular respiration. It's how cells make energy by consuming carbohydrate and oxidizing it to make ATP, which is adenosine triphosphate, which is our primary energy storage molecule. And when viruses hijack cells, or when cells are otherwise also stressed or fatigued or injured, they don't use cellular respiration, because cellular respiration produces a high rate of electron transfer, which can potentially produce massive amounts of reactive oxygen species. Other pathways for energy generation, like fatty acid oxidation and fermentation, are much safer and don't produce as much energy, and so they reduce the risk of producing reactive oxygen species. So, so when viruses hijack cells, they don't engage in cellular respiration. It changes the cell to engage in what's called glycolysis. And I'm not going to get into all these, because I can already hear the boredom in my voice talking about all these really technicalities. But anyway, but aspirin reverses that. Aspirin actually blocks glycolysis in cells, and so viruses are not able to effectively hijack cells when there is aspirin present. So aspirin is really good at restraining the infection. But alone, it's not enough to actually prevent or cure viral infections. We need our body to also be doing that effectively too. And the primary way in which it does it is also the peroxidase enzymes that I was just talking about, that are involved in cystic fibrosis. It doesn't matter the infection. Our immune system all functions with peroxidase, the peroxidase system. And that includes lactoperoxidase and myeloperoxidase and eosinophil peroxidase, and there's some others too, but I can't remember their names right now. And utilizing the halide substrates and the pseudohalide cyanide. And so when you get any kind of infection, that is triggered. a cold or the flu or the measles or even acne. Any kind of foreign parasite infections, any kind of foreign invasion of the body triggers the peroxidase system, because that's what the immune cells use to produce substrates like the hypohalous acids that actually do the killing of those foreign agents. One of the reasons that COVID was so dangerous is because viruses like that can overwhelm the immune system so rapidly it's not able to keep up with those infections. Other conditions, for instance, like the cold, are not as dangerous because our body is able to produce far more immune cells and immune factors than is required to get rid of those infections, so it doesn't actually threaten, our well-being. And also those pathogens are more susceptible to those things. uh in turn, and sorry, this is also kind of getting into some complex biology. And that content isn't that entertaining anyway, but this is how the body works. Like, the science is not, I mean, I think is exciting, but it's not like, really exciting. But anyway, okay. So peroxidase enzymes, though, don't just function out of the blue. They need the support of other enzymes. And before peroxidases can actually oxidize the halide substrates for the immune reaction, they need a source of oxygen to use to do that, which is hydrogen peroxide. But that doesn't just come from anywhere either. In turn, actually, most commonly, there are other sources, but one of the primary sources are another group of enzymes called oxidases. And oxidases are in turn dependent mostly on, and I say mostly because like all enzymes have like amino acids. So like if you don't eat protein, like you can't make amino acid. I mean, you can't make enzymes. So like there are other ingredients, but primarily like the bigger catalytic factors for oxidases are riboflavin and molybdenum. Riboflavin is a B vitamin. It's vitamin B2, and molybdenum is an element. And molybdenum, actually, interestingly, is what makes spring water taste like spring water, or cucumbers and peas taste so refreshing. In fact, those are the taste of molybdenum. Molybdenum tastes like spring water. It is a cofactor in a lot of enzymes like the oxidases, and which is also dependent on riboflavin. But there is molybdenum in a lot of foods. And here comes the real crux of this problem too. And this is also what accounts for long COVID and why a lot of people don't understand what is going on in long COVID, because it's really kind of complicated. Which is why we're already into the weeds here with the science talk. So, oxidases. Okay, so the immune system the peroxidase system requires oxidases in order to get the oxygen that's required to make the hypohalous acids to actually kill the viruses. In turn, the oxidases use water actually as the source of oxygen, or hydrogen. I can't remember exactly which. It's a complex, like it's the transfer of electrons. So usually it's referred as hydrogen, but it's an oxidative reaction. It's very complex. It's very complex chemistry. So much of our immune system, because it hinges on oxidase function, actually hinges on riboflavin itself as the immune factor. And because of that, because of the catalyzing source, I mean, you need enough water, but obviously you're drinking water, right? So, the biggest factor in the immune response then in initiating it is riboflavin availability. Oh, well, also, and molybdenum is also actually quite common in food. As long as you're eating kind of even a remotely healthy diet, you get actually plenty of molybdenum. But you also actually get plenty of riboflavin in your diet. So the odd thing that makes this kind of difficult to figure out was like, where is the deficiency down the chain that's causing these problems? Several years ago, when I was doing research on GABA in the body, and learning about how certain environmental stresses and opportunistic infections affected the body, I discovered that Streptomyces bacteria, which are a type of bacteria that's usually common to soils that feed on plants. They're everywhere in nature, and every soil has Streptomyces in them. Some of them are symbiotic organisms with plants, and a lot of them are actually pathogenic organisms for plants. I discovered around that time that Streptomyces bacteria producing an antibiotic called streptavidin is the primary cause of autism. And I haven't done a stream on autism, but I talk about it in my book. And what happens is all humans, we all get colonized by Streptomyces bacteria eventually. This information takes up several chapters in my book, and so it's like way more information than I can like talk about on a stream. But essentially, opportunistic bacteria like Streptomyces don't normally inhabit the human gut. Our gut maintains and manages the bacteria that are allowed in there through various strategies while you're growing up. And when you're younger, your body is much better at evicting and preventing Streptomyces colonization than it is when you get older, because of nutritional stress and environmental stress and emotional stress and other infections like parasitic infections. Very interestingly, most parasites don't outright cause disease when you get infected by them. They actually, but they're very well evolved to. There's hundreds and hundreds of parasites actually that infect human beings, and many of them actually can be asymptomatic. So they don't actually produce outright disease, but they do facilitate their ingress by inhibiting the immune system, and then that in turn allows secondary bacterial infections, and those cause more outright disease actually. So there's lots of these factors that eventually weaken your gut defense systems. And when you start to get older, a lot of that in part occurs because of colonization by Streptomyces, because Streptomyces produce antibiotics. In fact, Streptomyces are actually the source of a lot of antibiotics in the environment. Some of them aren't in use anymore because they were more of the original, some of the original antibiotics that were discovered. But that's where a lot of antibiotics came from, were from these bacteria that produce antibiotics. And the reason for producing these antibiotics is not for human benefit. You know, what the original antibiotic was penicillin, right? And that came from a mold. It was not, those things are not produced for human benefit. They're actually produced for competition with other microbial species. And that's why Streptomyces bacteria produce these antibiotics, is because they use them to compete in the soil microbiome for access to nutrient substrate. So autism is caused specifically by Streptomyces that produce streptavidin, and that binds to biotin. And biotin is crucial for a lot of very important pathways in our body. Most consequentially for autism is metabolism of ammonia. Ammonia is very toxic when it is not incorporated into amino acids and protein. And so our body has this pathway to incorporate ammonia into a storage mechanism called glutamine. And that also serves as an energy source for our body. Is very, very important, but it requires biotin in order to happen, because actually biotin is needed to break down the branched chain amino acids, which are part of that. It's this whole complicated thing. Excuse me. And so, I did that throat clearing right into the mic. I'm sorry. Very sorry about that. Yeah, I told you this is just really complex stuff. I maybe I shouldn't have streamed about this one, but anyway, okay. So, Streptomyces are not a commensal microbiome, a microbe of the human gut, and our body normally does a very good job at evicting them, preventing them from setting up shop in there. But all humans get Streptomyces eventually, because eventually our immune system and our defenses start to fail as we get older. And then because these bacteria interfere with B vitamins and other nutrients in our body, that that's what induces and causes aging and metabolic decline, because, like, for instance, like, you get lower and lower amounts of biotin and lower and lower amounts of other nutrients. Most consequentially for COVID, because of the dependency of oxidase enzymes on riboflavin, is there is another species of Streptomyces that produces another antibiotic called rosioflavin, and rosioflavin directly inhibits riboflavin. Now, it's a little bit different though, because streptavidin binds to biotin, so it's very, very destructive. That's one of the reasons why autism can sometimes be so severe, is because the bound between my lips can't keep up with my brain sometimes. The streptavidin biotin bond is the strongest bond in nature. Covalent bond, something like that. There's a qualification in there, I can't remember. But also, actually, interestingly, egg whites contain a related compound called avidin, and that was actually discovered first. And avidin and streptavidin are actually used in laboratory tests oftentimes in order to measure biotin in experiments and tests and things like that. And it's one of the strongest bonds in nature, or like the strongest bond in nature, actually. And so streptavidin, Streptomyces, streptavidin production in the gut from Streptomyces bacteria is actually really, really destructive to human health, because it so strongly interferes with biotin. It can be overcome with some a biotin supplement, and that's why actually, like, it's been established that biotin supplementation in people with autism actually helps to alleviate a lot of the symptoms. And also, we're also talking about, when we talk about autism, like, I'm talking about, like, some people, when I've tried to help people with autism, they get offended as if I'm trying to cure their personality. Like, I'm not talking about that. Like, a lot of people with autism suffer from debilitating gut dysfunction, like serious stomach pains and gut irregularity. And it also produces really, really high stress hormones because you're not able to metabolize sugar and proteins properly. So, and a lot of people, adults with autism, have high rates of depression for those kinds of reasons. So, like, we're talking about the symptoms here, like the debilitating discomfort and things. When kids have autism and they have coping mechanisms like rocking or hitting their head against the wall, the reason that they're doing that is because the pain that is created by the presence of those bacteria and the excess ammonia in their body is so excruciating that it actually feels better to hit your head against something repeatedly than it does to just exist. Like, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. That's the effect that these bacteria have on your body. And like I mentioned, like, normally these bacteria are not able to colonize the gut. One of the major reasons they are eventually, besides just normal aging, are the presence of toxic agrochemicals, glyphosate and other herbicides and pesticides in food. Also, dieting behaviors like starvation and not eating, those kinds of things. All of these factors, like, derange the gut microbiome, and then that allows these opportunistic bacteria to get in there and take over. And so a lot of people actually have the Streptomyces bacteria that produce rosioflavin. And like I mentioned, unlike streptavidin, which binds to biotin, rosioflavin merely mimics riboflavin. So it's not quite as destructive, but it still is destructive. So it basically, like, will insert itself and compete with riboflavin for riboflavin dependent pathways. So you get into the situation where we've got a lot of people in the country in the world who suffer malnutrition, either unwillingly or willingly. Like, if you have eating disorders, if you diet a lot, if you don't eat enough food. And it's really interesting too, because I am seeing a lot of, women especially are subject to a lot of trauma surrounding their body image, and engage in behaviors like bulimia and anorexia because of the emotional trauma that they experienced growing up. But men can suffer that as well. I had body dysmorphia when I was younger. I always was starving myself and dieting. And then you get obesity and diabetes, and these are also caused by different pathogens. I won't get into that right now. I do talk about it in my book, though. For fear of overwhelming you all. I'm overwhelming myself, actually. So I didn't realize this was actually such a complicated topic to talk about. So, okay. So, uh, uh, you get Streptomyces colonization in the gut. Streptomyces then produce riboflavin. And because there is enough riboflavin in the diet, but also our commensal microbiome will produce riboflavin. And so you get these other bacteria in there that are producing rosoflavin in order to compete with riboflavin-dependent pathways that bacteria that ends up interfering with our riboflavin pathways. And that makes you more susceptible to infection because our entire immune response is dependent on flavin-dependent enzymes, like oxidases. So, knowing this, I wrote a whole article about how, you can dose aspirin twice a day and also take riboflavin. Riboflavin, interestingly, is also very light sensitive. So when you have enough riboflavin in your body and you go out into the sunshine, sunlight reacting with riboflavin actually oxidizes it and causes it to produce the oxygen that is also in the. And this is one of the reasons why oxidases use riboflavin, is because it is so sensitive an oxidizer. It's the point is to cause oxidation, but in an oxidase enzyme, that oxidation is controlled and directed to the benefit of peroxidase enzymes, which then produce the hypohalous acids that then kill the virus. If you have an eating disorder, or you diet a lot, or you have metabolic disease, you will be colonized by Streptomyces producing rosoflavin. The reason for this is that, like I mentioned earlier, Streptomyces are everywhere. Streptomyces are on all the food that you eat. They're everywhere in nature, and lots of them are commensal and symbiotic to plants, but they also one of their major roles in the environment is to consume and decompose plant material. When plants die and they fall into the dirt, Streptomyces are the reason that plant breaks down. If there were no Streptomyces, no plants would break down at all. In fact, that's actually where where coal and tar and oil come from in the earth. I mean, gasoline. That comes from an era in Earth's history where microbes could not break down various trees and other large plants. And so those plants would literally just fall on top of each other and just build layers and layers, and then they would compact because they would get so dense. That literally happened in the Earth's history. So that's actually one of the roles of Streptomyces, is to break down plant matter. And that's one of the reasons why they thrive so well in our gut too. You always, even if you're having hamburgers, you're having plant matter, like that bun, that grain. They love cellulose. This ironically actually is one of the reasons why carnivore diets often will help people feel better, and that makes them think that it's good for them when it's not, because it doesn't have any plant matter. So actually it helps to treat Streptomyces colonization, but there's so many other pathogens actually that can colonize us and cause problems. So and when you do carnivore diet, you actually don't produce any short chain fatty acids, because those require indigestible carbohydrate for that by our microbiome. So carnivore diet is actually really destructive anyway. So you've got colonization by rosoflavin producing microbes. And so if you just use some extra riboflavin, that can easily overcome the effect of the rosoflavin. Especially since riboflavin supplements are often excessively potent, huge quantities in just a single pill. It's something like 10,000% the daily required value, something like that. You really don't even need a lot. For instance, the riboflavin supplement I have is 100 milligrams, and really for this benefit, 10 milligrams is enough. So, and it's not that riboflavin is not harmful at all, even in excess. So it's just more of an economical thing. So you can take a capsule of riboflavin, open it up, and just dump out a little bit, guesstimate 10 milligrams and do that once a day is plenty. That's actually how much is, and someone like me who has this catastrophic health history with so many diseases, and because one of the things, and what a lot of people don't know this either, I didn't know it either, because I didn't know that I even had cystic fibrosis. Cystic fibrosis also comes with a heightened risk of both diabetes and cancer as accompanying problems, as if having that wasn't bad enough. And that's the reason why I got cancer, and have had diabetic symptoms for the last 10 years as well. I don't have like full on diabetes. I don't require medicine, but I do often present. Before I did a lot of this work, I and even still, like, will have, if I don't like do things right and manage my health properly, I have blood sugar, like, issues. And so, and then that's that. And so even someone like me who has all these health problems was able to get COVID 3 times, recover very rapidly each time, and not have long COVID because of this, not knowledge that I have. So anyway, so when we're dealing with, sorry. So the paper that I wrote that I talked about, like, treating COVID is very simple. It's take aspirin twice a day, probably like 2 to 3 pills each. The ones I use were like 325 milligrams, the standard aspirin. I'm very big though, so probably like 2 a day for smaller people would be plenty. And riboflavin, and a supplement of riboflavin every day. And if you're healthy and you don't have like pre-existing health conditions, the riboflavin can entirely prevent you from even having symptoms. Not many people at all that read my book and follow my work even got COVID. I probably about like 2 people asked me for help that follow me when I was back during the pandemic, because most everybody's already doing all of these things anyway. But anyway, so that's what prevents like a severe COVID reaction, is because I was taking riboflavin and using aspirin to restrain the virus, had very, very rapid recovery and no lingering side effects from it at all. And oppositely, the same problem underlies long COVID. And also, this isn't just from my work. There are studies trickling out now that show that riboflavin deficiency underlies long COVID. You can look it up on the National Institute of Health Study Depository, NCBI, National Center for Biotech, NCBI. You can find those studies there. If you just look up long COVID and riboflavin, they come up. So the reason for this is because the initial immune response was not strong enough to effectively kill the virus off quickly. It caused major tissue damage, but this is not sealing your fate. Like, you don't have to die from it, and it doesn't have to be a long-term thing. You just need to get more riboflavin in your body. There's so many other pathways in our body that are dependent on riboflavin. I talk about, or maybe you have heard too, about NAD, nicotinamide adenine dinucleotide. It's a major energy molecule in our body. It doesn't have energy itself, but what it does is it passes electrons between reactions where it's kind of like the interim between where we get energy from food and then utilize it in pathways. There's a very closely related molecule called flavin adenine dinucleotide, which is basically the same molecule, except instead of vitamin B3, it's vitamin B2. And that one is just as important for so many metabolic pathways. But because coronavirus is so virulent, it demands a very, very exaggerated immune response. And that very, very rapidly depletes you of what little riboflavin your body might already have due to these other factors, such as colonization by Streptomyces, dieting, undereating, and pre-existing metabolic conditions, which always accompany have riboflavin deficiency because of Streptomyces. So because there's enough riboflavin in food to provide our needs for it, the reason that we have these problems is because of exogenous pathogenic factors like these bacteria that interfere with those pathways. So anyway, so that's what underlies long COVID. So basically, in long COVID, take riboflavin. You can use a multi-B vitamin if you like, but you should be daily. I really like brewer's yeast. Brewer's yeast also has a lot of B vitamins. It's natural. The only one it's missing is B12, which is very important for our health. But a lot of brewer's yeast and nutritional yeast products are they're not adulterated, but they add synthetic vitamins to them to give them higher quantities, which there's nothing really wrong with that, but it kind of just defeats the purpose of having a natural one. The natural ones, you do not need as much of the vitamin to provide the same benefit. Natural B vitamins are much more potent and effective. But the synthetic ones work just fine. I use a well, I guess I won't say the brand name, but I use a synthetic riboflavin separately. Yeah, and I just open up a capsule and put in like 10 actually, I mean, I don't really use it anymore. I only use it when I need to. Uh uh because normal, I mean, well, I won't tell you that either, because I know there's something that happens on my body that I know for sure that whether or not I have riboflavin, it has to do with like erections. So but anyway, so I know that my body has plenty of riboflavin normally, but during problems like coronavirus infection, or in order to like prevent it, like taking riboflavin as a prophylactic can very, very much help either provide resistance or shortened recovery time from the disease. And so, but basically, so this underlies long COVID is the damage from the virus that is also sustained by continued riboflavin deficiency, because that's the thing that made people so susceptible in the first place to experience such prolonged, such severe damage from the virus, and an inability to completely to eradicate it effectively in the first place. So yeah. Anyway, that's long COVID, and because like I mentioned, like riboflavin, one of its roles is sunlight. It is sensitivity to sunlight. That's not an accident. Sometimes people talk about riboflavin as if it's like, highly sensitive to sunlight, like, you have to protect it away and blah, blah, blah. That's on purpose. Like nature, the reason that riboflavin is so sensitive is because it is meant by nature to be an oxidizing agent. That's why it's used in oxidase reactions in the immune system to clear infections. On top of that, it helps, usually in long COVID, the virus has been cleared for a while, so that's not a problem. But the halides, are iodine, fluoride, bromine, and chloride, and cyanide. And so having like a healthy diet full of fruits and vegetables, like fruits are actually like a source of fluoride in nature. Bromine comes from seafoods, like shellfish and fish and seaweed, and chloride, obviously comes from salting food. And then cyanide comes from eating your leafy greens and almonds and carrots and all those kinds of things. And so those, and so like if you have a healthy diet, you're getting plenty of those nutrients to support the actual killing of viruses and pathogens. But in long COVID specifically, there's already been too much damage done. So you have to repair that, and that requires intervention and this is one of the other reasons too, like, there are certain people that scoff at taking vitamins, but like, that's exactly why some of these health problems seem mysterious and incurable, is because there's literally and Streptomyces are not a pathogen. They're an opportunistic bacteria. They're not feeding off of us, and they're not causing us direct disease. That's why they're not really identified by the medical establishment as a problem. They are competing with our gut microbiome, and that's what causes the disease. And so if you turn your nose up at taking B vitamins when you have long COVID, you're not going to get better, because there's literally a bacterium in your gut that's competing with the B vitamins that would normally be making you better. So you really do have to. There is a way to remove Streptomyces from the gut. It's a little more complicated than I want to get to in the stream. It's part of my book. It's also not super effective because I'm still studying them, but it does work pretty well. And I mean, I know because it helps to get rid of the symptoms that are associated with that. And you can't do that without knowledge. Like, one of the reasons we age and we have metabolic diseases as we age is because our body starts to break down, and these opportunistic microbes start to colonize us. We are full of nutrients. Every single day you shove tons and tons of nutrient-dense food into your mouth. There's lots of microbes that want to live in there, so they get free lunch. And if you don't know about that, willful ignorance is not going to save you. And doctors can't either, because they don't know this stuff. That's why you end up on a ventilator instead of just being given aspirin and riboflavin. Toward the end of the pandemic, I would love to think that I had something to do with this, but I really doubt it. Um, Doctors finally started using aspirin as a regular treatment in the COVID regimen. You look at the treatment protocols for a lot of people at the beginning of the pandemic. No aspirin. Toward the end, there was aspirin appeared quite a bit. I mean, from the anecdotal samples that I saw. So, like, and I say the reason I had nothing to do with it is because hardly I don't have much of a following at all. But I appreciate you guys that are here. So, but anyway, and I'm saying, oh, hello, other Mike. The new update is soon. I keep saying it's going to be soon, and it keeps time keeps dragging on. But like I get because every time, so I was like, I've been working on the immune system for like last 4.5, 5 years. I started making real progress like right around before COVID, and then during COVID, more things. And as I started making more progress, I started uncovering like even more stuff, and that I really thought should be included in the update. And then before I know it, I haven't released an update in over a year now. So I'm sorry about that, but it really is gonna be soon. I'm finishing the final. I'm finishing the very last lines of research and editing it, and so I'm hoping, but I was hoping for a release last November, and it's March now. So I'm hoping in the middle of May, or 1st of May is when I might be releasing it. So it is soon, but soon on like a longer term scale than we all like. I want to be done with this so bad. I'm so fucking tired of writing. But yeah, anyway, so I specifically have in mind, one of the reasons I want to talk about this is there's somebody that I admire who's suffering from long COVID. And the reason they're suffering from long COVID is because scientists like them don't know this fucking information. If they knew it, if they knew what caused long COVID, it wouldn't be a thing. You just go and get it treated and it'd be done. Or we wouldn't even gotten it in the first place. It is these deficiencies of nutritional information and bacteriology that are the cause of these problems. And it doesn't do you any good to stick your head in the sand and be like, oh, you're not a doctor, so I'm not going to listen to you, because I can't tell you how many fucking times I run into that. Yeah, anyway, so it's really that easy. And, if somebody like me with cystic fibrosis and 3 types of cancer and, alcoholism and addiction and depression in my history can, survive COVID and not even have long COVID right now, that's the reason. It's not because I was healthy. It was because I knew exactly how to treat these bacteria and what was causing it. And, and a lot of people, unfortunately, are not alive anymore because nobody else knows that information. Not from any fault of mine. I would love to be, I don't want to be famous, but I would love to have my information out there and people benefiting from it. It doesn't do me a lot of good to just be sitting here in my book, unread, So anyway, but yeah. I don't suppose any of you guys, I know the other mic on here, you don't have COVID, but, did any of you guys else get COVID? It wasn't fun. The second time I got it, COVID evolved so rapidly. It was really fascinating. The first time I got it, I had that symptom called COVID toes, and it was before anyone even knew that it was a thing. So I have this horrible cough and lung constriction that's just really painful. And also one of my toes is blistered and swollen. And I thought that, maybe I happened to experience that fear that everyone has, that one day when I was putting on my shoe, there was a spider inside finally. And then a few weeks later, they were like, oh, by the way, one of the symptoms for COVID is swollen red toes. And then the second time I got it, I had a really bad headache. And then the third time I got it, it had evolved and was affecting people's esophageal sphincters, which was really weird because also very strangely, in spite of all of the health problems that I've had, I've never had gastric reflux. And this was the first time I've ever had gastric reflux. And it just it was like my stomach was not closed off at all, and everything just came up into my esophagus. It was so weird, on top of coughing and feeling very lousy. But anyway, knocked it out. really fast. So anyway, there's not a lot of people here this time. Normally we talk about other things. It might be good to have one stream on my page that's only an hour long instead of 4. But hey, do you guys want to talk about anything else? Otherwise, we will end the stream. If you are listening to the VOD, come by anytime. I let people chat with me and we can talk about health concerns that you have. Hey, 9/11. Oh, you feel like you aged 10 years? 9/11, did we talk about COVID? Was that you? I think like when I was streaming, like, was it like 2 years ago and you had just gotten COVID and you asked me about it? Was that you? I know that there was somebody that we were chatting about. While we were chatting, you had just gotten COVID. Using grapeseed extract. Oh yeah, well, yeah, grapeseed extract. Yeah. Oh, it was last year. Yeah. Um, because 9/11, are you? Never mind. I might be thinking of somebody else actually, though. Still, I was gonna say, aren't you very young? I think the person I was thinking of was like very, very, very young, actually. Like a minor. I don't think is that you? Are you that young? Uh, yeah. COVID is very stressful on the body and can cause a lot of issues. Yeah, grapeseed extract having tannin helps to bind nutrients that you're taking and increase their uptake. So it can also oh, it is, yeah, okay. So oh wait. Oh no, yeah, sorry, no, that wasn't. I'm thinking of somebody else. There was somebody we were we were, because you've been here for a long time too, 9/11. But there was somebody who asked me who I was thinking of who was actually like, they were like a teenager. And because I was worried about them because they were so young. But I hope they were fine because they were young. So yeah, and B12, the B12 stuff helps a lot because it helps your gut microbiome produce short-chain fatty acids, which can help increase energy and things like that. But yeah, tannin, having tannin with food is really, really profitable. It helps to increase nutrient intake, and because like, I don't know, if I haven't done research if tannin directly protects B vitamins, but tannin protects food and their nutrients from methanogens and from hydrogen sulfide producing bacteria, which destroy nutrients as well. So I think it can have indirect benefits for B vitamins, and yeah, it's really great. That's what you guys that are still listening, my update is talks about a lot of stuff. It talks about parasites, talks about tannins, talks about more about anthocyanin. Oh, I found out that I figured out that actually UTIs and yeast infections are actually symptomatic of a chronic parasite infection. I'm sorry to say, if you have a vagina and you're listening to this, if you get repeated UTIs and yeast infections, it's actually caused by a chronic parasitic infection called Trichomonas vaginalis. That's also actually the cause of cystic fibrosis that I've come to find out. Trichomonas vaginalis actually downregulates the very genes that are involved in cystic fibrosis, which are immune response genes, which actually do the things that we've been talking about in this stream of the peroxidase enzymes. That pathway gets blocked by the CFTR, cystic fibrosis transmembrane conductance regulator. It causes those conditions. So all that stuff is going to be in my update, which is coming out soon. I promise. I mean, but part of the reason that I'm not on a schedule, like it's not a definite schedule, is because like I can't really, divine when my research is going to be done. I have to figure out the stuff that I'm working on, and and it does take time, and it always seems like it's going to be, like that's why I thought my last update was going to come out much sooner, because I thought I would release it with the other stuff I'd been working on. But then the other stuff that I discovered from that work I was like, oh yeah, this stuff is really important, I should probably wait to release it, because sometimes I've released updates like too quickly, and then I've discovered something like a month later, and I was like, oh, god damn it, I wish this was in here. Yeah, so it very well could continue being that way for the rest of the year, or more even. But I doubt it. I'm really trying to get an update out, like really working on finishing this stuff and getting it out there. So, oh, excuse me. Mike, read Pen reviews, fact checks, nutrition books. The book advocating Mediterranean diet are far and away the most reliable. What is your hot take on the Mediterranean diet? Oh, well, I mean, yeah, actually, it's really funny because there are often some truths to a lot of dietary trends, actually. What comes to mind, actually, right away when I think about this is way back in the day when I was like, I think it was maybe in the 90s when I was a little kid. My mom was doing the I think it was called the Master Cleanse. Is that what it's called? Where you do like lemon juice and olive oil and cayenne pepper. I think that's maybe what the Master Cleanse was, which was this really destructive dieting trend where you like only drank lemon juice with olive oil and cayenne pepper for like a week. It was so bad. But it was really funny because actually it was really close to hitting on some of the health problems that like are that accompany like obesity and stuff like that. Our body, for instance, extracts citric acid from the citric acid cycle only in the presence of vitamin D. So one of the most destructive problems with vitamin D deficiency is that your body's not able to make citric acid. And yes, and this is the same acid in lemons that makes lemons tart, courses through our body. Our body actually makes it from carbohydrate too. It's not even that complicated. But we do require vitamin D in order to do that. And so as you get older or you age or you have metabolic disease and you don't produce you're not able to make vitamin D, or if you have chronic sunlight deficiencies. One of the reasons that a lot of dudes look like cretins when they're indoors all the time, just sitting by a computer and never go outside, is because your body needs vitamin D in order to make citric acid, which participates in energy production. And when your body cannot make enough energy, it literally cannot form itself very well. Like you literally have weird fat deposition spots and weird face shapes, and you lose your hair. That's all a direct consequence of vitamin D deficiency. We evolved for millions of years underneath the sun and are dependent on it for a nutrient, sunlight. And for more reasons too than just that. It also downregulates torporific hormones that slow down the metabolic rate. And like I mentioned, like riboflavin reacts to sunlight. It's part of the immune response. There is a correlation seen between various viral infections like coronavirus or the flu seasonally, and a lot of people think that that's because of vitamin D, but actually it's just because of normal sun exposure because of riboflavin's interaction with the sun. Although vitamin D does play a major role in the immune system as well. But it's really funny too though, because you see the reverse in places that are too hot to go out in the summertime. So like coronavirus in most states peaked during the winter time when people weren't outside, but in like Florida it peaked during the summer because it's too hot in the summer to go outside there. But anyway, vitamin D, citric acid. Dieting. So the Master Cleanse, supplementing citric acid can be very helpful sometimes when you have metabolic problems. And then on top of that, olive oil is very high in oleic acid, which are our most important respiratory enzyme, cytochrome oxidase. Oleic acid stabilizes cytochrome oxidase. So it makes the enzyme usable for a longer period of time before it falls apart. When you don't have oleic acid in your diet, your cytochrome is not very stable. So then your body, it gets destroyed by its participation in the pathways in which it's required. And this reduces cellular respiration, which then induces states of hyperphosphatemia. where you get calcification of soft tissues and all these other problems. And vitamin D and vitamin K are also required for that thing too. So anyway, so very often in dietary trends, there's often grains of truth that underlie it, which is one of the reasons why it makes them so dangerous. Because what humans tend to do is they tend to go, oh, that makes me feel better. This is the answer, and I'm going to devote my entire life and energy to doing that. And it causes so many problems, especially with like caloric intake and other factors like that. Um, uh, I just dealt with somebody recently who's also gay, and the gay boys just have so much trauma around their body and acceptance, and they're like, the worst thing that can happen to a gay guy is to get fat. Not saying really that's what they think can happen. So they're all starving themselves, and then when you starve yourself, you directly enhance depression, because depression is a deficiency of dopamine, which is made from the amino acid tyrosine, which, by the way, is also really important in immune function. So if you're dieting, you don't get enough tyrosine to make dopamine to make yourself feel good, and that also crashes your immune system. So then you get exposed and vulnerable to diseases. It's really fucked up, and yeah, dieting culture is just like, it's just the worst thing. And I mean, like, when it comes down to it, like, really, like, you're gonna fucking kill yourself just so other people can like you. Like, that's really sad. And I'm saying that from personal experience. Like, that's all that I did for like the first 20 years of my adulthood. Wait, how old am I? I'm 42. So not 20 years, 15, 16 years of my adulthood. Um, it's so dumb to do that. It really is so dumb to do that. Like, who the fuck cares what other people think about you? Caring what other people think about you is one of the most destructive behaviors we have as human beings. But it's built into our survival biology, because we are a social animal that is dependent on other human beings. So it really taps into like evolutionary biology, actually. So that's one of the reasons why it's so debilitating. But the Mediterranean diet is like one of the healthier ones, and the exact reason, and really one of the only reasons that the Mediterranean diet is healthy, is because of its increase in tannins. Tannins are a natural antibiotic, which is beneficial for us, and prebiotic. And you won't see this information out there. This is part of my work. I realized from my work that I've been doing that tannin is actually a microbiome modulating factor for plants, which we indirectly benefit from. And the Mediterranean diet is very, very high in tannins. Tannins account for the health properties of wine, red wine, and chocolate, and tea, and nuts, and all these foods that are, sort of stereotypically associated with good health. And yeah, and I mean, my book has had information on tannins in them for like about, if you don't know, I actually do upload my changes to my book as they happen. So if you bought my book over the last few years, or over the last year, or you like got the update, you have some of this information. But I don't announce the official one though until I'm fully done with it, because information will change and the book is always a work in progress. But yeah, so my book has had information on tannins in it for a little while, and yeah, and anyway, yeah, Mediterranean diet, also has lots of olive oil, so that's really good. But you can get oleic acid from like hazelnuts and dairy, and also like if there's a new product kind of around called high oleic sunflower oil that you can use to get some oleic acid sources. But yeah, yeah, no, I mean, yeah, but that's why Mediterranean diet is good. It does actually have like a lot of it. And that's one of the reasons why there's also the attitude things. Like, so for instance, one of the things that's missing from like that diet per se is that people that live in the Mediterranean, they don't eat like Americans. Like in a lot of our Western cultures, I mean, Italy is Western, but kind of, we treat food as a necessary evil. So like we're so busy and we're so stressed out. What can we do to like, like, I don't want to have to fucking eat, but I have to, so I'm just gonna like go to this fast food drive-through and scarf down my food. But even when we do sit down to like a normal, like nice meal, we tend to just like eat really, really quickly, and then we're just like done, and then we are, um, and that's it. And or then you might have some dessert and wine too, but you'll be watching TV while you do that, and things like that. People in Italy and France and Spain and Portugal, they sit down to a meal. And in the Middle East too. They sit down to a meal, and meals last for hours, and they spend a meal with family and friends. And there is a huge, huge factor there that is not covered by the technicality of the nutrition that you're eating, which is the interaction with loved ones and friends that induces oxytocin and dopamine and lowers your stress hormones. In my book, several chapters, like on depression and PTSD and anxiety, all talk about how stress hormones and stress in our lives cause these problems directly by disrupting the endocrine system. And if you live in a car-centric world like we usually do in the West here, and you have no friends, and you hate your family because they're all traumatized and they're all really abusive and mean anyway, like there's an emotional endocrinological factor behind wellness that has nothing to do with diet. It has everything to do with your environment. And you can't account for that by taking supplements. And that's why a lot of people who come to me for help and ask for help get really frustrated, because they've been putting all of this work into their health and buying tons of supplements and doing all these things and changing their diets and going on diets, and it's not working. And one of the reasons it's not working is because food is not the only factor that goes into our well-being. Literally, your personal relationships have a massive effect on your physical health. I don't know if you've ever noticed, like, you might very often see couples where like maybe one is like fat and the other one is skinny, and they always argue about fatness and break up and get back together and break up or have a very, well, they don't really break up that much, those couples actually. They just really kind of just argue with each other all the time. One of the reasons that person is fat, besides pathogenic infection, is because our human psychology is, because it is oriented toward other human beings, and our literal physical safety and well-being within the group is threatened by an unreliable partner, because the constant conflict with them makes our evolutionary biology very insecure and aware that our safety is tenuous and our position where we are very tenuous. And our body responds to that kind of stress by inducing fat retention, actually. Because in evolutionary terms, if you are a single human being and you're kicked out of a group or a family or a community, you'll die, because you literally have almost hardly no way to provide for yourself. And when the body is under those kinds of environmental stresses, they're the same stresses as nutritional deficiency. When you don't eat enough carbohydrate, your adrenaline rises. When you don't eat enough salt, your adrenaline rises. When you don't get enough love, your adrenaline rises. It's not just nutritional. And people in the Mediterranean have a much more laid back, laissez-faire attitude toward life, where they only work to live. They don't live to work like we do out here in the West. And on top of that, there's the whole sunlight exposure thing, like getting sunlight, the amount that people do in the Mediterranean because they have great weather. We can't always replicate that part. But you can, very often, excuse me, very often bad weather is just an excuse not to go out in the sun. You can still go out when it's partly cloudy. And I mean, not completely cloudy, but when when the sky's splotchy and the sun peeks through, like occasionally, you can still go outside, sit in a corner outside of your house that actually has direct sun so that you're warmer, instead of going off into like a windy area or something. Like, we can still be outdoors. Like, our ancestors were outdoors all winter long, even though it was winter time. They just had thick animal furs and other things to keep them warm, but they were still outside very often. You still had to prepare food and do things. And so, and anyway, there's a lot of factors that, this was a real hot take, Mike, but yeah, there's a lot of factors that go into wellness than just your diet. And those things are not accounted for in a capitalist-centric, exploitative society that we live in, where people are always trying to make money off of other people's health problems. One of the reasons that, you know, like the generation before us, you spend 40 years of dieting and never get anywhere. It's because our literal communities do not provide for that wellness. You have to make it yourself. You have to cultivate food culture. You have to cultivate friends. You have to cultivate interactions yourself. You can't wait for that to come to you. All of these young men, you know, that are on the internet complaining about a lack of sexual attraction and how ugly they are and stuff, like, you know, you're responsible for your life. Other people are not. And there are barriers that just happen because they happen. You know, cars are really fucking awesome. Like, I love cars. But like, our car-centric society keeps us from just, you know, like being outside and walking the street. You get a little fucking exercise and some sunlight exposure so that you don't look like a cretin. You can still go outside. I was coaching somebody one time who was having health problems, and he was living at home literally in his parents' basement. But their basement was like, their house was kind of like a cabin style, and the basement actually had like this huge wall of windows that looked out onto the yard beyond. And I was like, one of your problems, like the reason that you're having all these health issues is because you're never outside. And I said, I know sometimes it's annoying to go outside because you don't have anything to do. Like, what do you think about starting a garden? Literally, he's living at home with his parents, and they lived like on like 2 or 3 acres of land. He could literally start a huge garden and be outside every single day, gardening, growing food, having a fun time, being under the sun. And he literally just wouldn't do it. Like, no reason, just like, I don't want to. And I'm like, I know, well, okay, I mean, I get that, but like, you know, there, you know, I can't help that. You know, you've got to have sunlight, so however you get it. You know, yeah, anyway, that was a rant. I guess I had a lot of that pent up. I wanted to talk. That was a good question, Mike. Anyway, real quick, if you want to ask anything else, ask. Otherwise, I think we're going to end. So, if you are not following me, you can follow me on Twitter at nathanguyhatch.com. You can find me on Instagram at NAYTEHATCH, Nate Hatch. And my website and information are beneath the video here. Fuck portion control. Yes, I do have my update coming soon. Keep an eye out for that email. I am going to finally also start having print books again. One of the pandemic wiped out my print sales, and that hobbled that. But then when everything started recovering, I didn't get print again because I wanted all this other stuff that I've been working on to be in that version when I did. And that's one of the reasons also why the update's been taking so long, because I want this version of the print book to be very comprehensive and have all of the stuff that I've been working on, and it will. So that will be available as well when I do announce it. I was thinking maybe of announcing the ebook update first so people can have it, and then just finishing the editing and stuff for the print version. Because, you know, you can change the ebook easy, but you can't change print once it's out there. So anyway, hey, thank you for participating. I really appreciate you guys being here. I hope the information was useful. And I guess I will see you on like the next stream, which I don't know when that will be. It's hard to stream when I'm working on this stuff. I get so my brain is just like all day like thinking, okay, how is this parasite doing this one thing that it's doing? and then I don't have energy to do anything else. But yeah, anyway, hope you guys have a good weekend. Take care of yourselves. Eat well. Goodbye.